Alright, we are recording. Before I move on to a code walkthrough of a few things in the editor, I'd like to do a bit of a code walkthrough through the CustomNPC system. I'm going to start with the CustomNPC Factory. This is in the, we're still on the game side of things. And let's see, actually this is going to remind you a lot of the original dialogue that pops up, or the initial dialogue that pops up when you create a new custom NPC. There's more or less a list of behaviors that are ordered by the, well, not ordered, stored by their behavior names, the name of the starting behavior, the global maximum hit points. There's the dialogue name and faceplate information here. There's a list of spawn points, and there's a reference back to the game panel. Bunch of getters. For a while I was going to call the custom NPC behavior factories workrooms. The factories are essentially classes that allow you to create instances of custom NPC behavior or custom NPC respectively. Anyways, there's this where we read it in from the file. Spawn all custom NPCs. I believe this is a method which gets called when we load up a room. Let's see here. Get all NPCs, room data, load room. Yeah, that's the one. Anyways, when it says spawn all custom NPCs, we iterate through all the spawn points. If the spawn point is suppressed, which essentially means the enemy has despawned permanently, then we skip this spawn point. Then for each behavior name in the list of behavior workrooms, I get the factory for the behavior. Tell it to create that behavior with parameters. I believe that this contains information that would otherwise be the canvas requirements. Things like target to which the NPC would move, thresholds for when the NPC gets too high or too low, etc. Creates that behavior and adds that behavior to this behavior map. Gets the starting behavior. Then finally it creates a new custom NPC, tells it which behavior to start with, its position, the desired width and height, the name, the faceplate information, all that jazz. Not sure what that false at the end is. Okay, should be commentary only. Yeah, there's the only commentary only NPCs are the speaker NPCs. Let's see. Add that to the return value. Yeah, if you see this, it's probably code that I've written. Anyways, that's essentially how a custom NPC gets generated. Let's look at the custom NPCs themselves. There's the current behavior. There's a reference back to the factory, and there's a map of the behaviors that could be taken. Probably this code could go away and we could just get these out of a reference to the factory. Let's see where a good place is to... Okay. I could do the draw method first. Let's see. Yeah, we've got this. Basically, I have speaker NPCs created through the custom NPC framework, at least a little bit. Read speaker NPC from file. I get all the information for the custom NPC there. Movement Manager is something that's under the hood inside custom NPC behavior. Hopefully we'll see that later on in this this walkthrough. Let's see. More or less I construct a custom NPC behavior based on the information I've read from the file for the speaker NPC. I read in the dialogue chain. put the dialog repository in there. Basically, I have a single dialog called Speaker NPC. I set the interaction hitbox from the data that the Speaker NPC has. Hard code it to never move. This is a motionless movement manager with no gravity. This is the only hitbox that it pays attention to. Let's see here. Where does it deal with the animations here? Okay, right there. Essentially, I'm creating a dummy NPC based off of all that information. It's very simplified in comparison to most custom NPCs. Let's look at the update method here. No, wait, I'll start with the draw method. Basically, it's a wrapper for calling the current behavior's draw method, although I do calculate where, in terms of the X and Y on the screen, the current behavior should be drawn. Alright, doing fine for time so far. The update method, flashing is basically what happens when a custom NPC takes damage. And let's see, current behavior update. Essentially, this is a wrapper method for the update method in the behaviors. Obviously, custom NPC behavior is where most of the meat of what the NPC does is located. That's the way it worked in the editor, and that's the way it works here. Have a list of constants here for the different movement rules. There's a reference back to the factory which contains a lot of the base data. These are parameters that are context sensitive, much like the context sensitive fields in the editor when you're telling it how it should move. Let's see. Default facing direction, movement mode, the gravity, a bunch of information about the 4 hitboxes, which are the hitbox for interaction with blocks, the weak point, interaction with the player if the player hits enter, and damaging the player. There's the animations here, there's the, over here is the dialogue information, the dialogue repository, and the dialogue choice repository. These are stored separately from each other on the back end, but they're essentially grouped together on the front end in the editor. There's the list of the switch rules here, the name of the behavior, and whether it should be drawn over the player character. All this stuff is straight out of the controls that you'll see in the custom NPC edit interface. So all of that is stored in the factory. I also have a movement manager. The animations are also stored here, which are probably just a copy of the animations here. I don't even know why I bothered to copy it in here. Oh well, doesn't matter. I do the same thing with the switch rules. I'm not exactly sure why I have all of this. Okay, now I realize why I did this. Pretty much, when you create a custom NPC behavior, each instance of the behavior needs to have its own hitbox. Yeah, each instance needs its own hitbox. If you share the hitboxes, then essentially what happens is you have one enemy over here, you have one enemy over here, and they're treated as if they have the exact same hitbox, like they're both here. You damage this enemy also takes damage for no apparent reason. Actually, it might be nice if you could link the health pools of enemies together, but I'm not going to worry about that at this point. Messages, this is a sort of a temporary array list. On a given tick, an NPC can receive 0 to many messages, and in the NPC's update method, or I should say in the behaviors update method, we go through those. This is something to check to see whether the player jumped onto or jumped off of the NPC. Obviously, if there's no block hitbox, or if the block hitbox is set up so that it's not solid to the player, then this doesn't have much effect. Anyways, let's take a look at the update method here. How much time do I have to get through it? About less than 5 minutes. Okay, let's see. If this is the first time we have entered the update method, then we check to see whether there's supposed to be dialogue that we show immediately upon entering the behavior. That's where this gets handled. Let's see. Then we have an event queue. These events can contain things like hitting a wall, hitting the ceiling. Any messages that we receive immediately get added to the event queue and then removed from the messages array list. Let's see, if the player's interacting and we actually have some player interaction hitboxes, then we check to see whether the NPC's interaction hitboxes, if any of those hitboxes intersect the player's hitbox. If they do, then we say we should begin interaction, and we begin the interaction here. Let's see. After this, we check to see what direction we're going in. The movement manager has its own compute movement method, which is more or less an update method. And I'm going to have to save my place here. The CustomNPC movement manager is actually an interface. There can be multiple different classes that implement this interface and fill in this role. Probably in another video I'll go over those. Let's see. So based on what the movement manager says, or how the movement manager says this should move, we try to set the next position to that. Then we have collision detection, which is essentially based off of the player's collision detection. Find the floor block from the tile map. Find an alternate floor block if possible from the rogue blocks, which includes conveyors and moving blocks and the like. Let's see. Do the same thing with the ceiling. And yes, if the ceiling block and the floor block are non-null both, then we check to see whether the difference between the floor and the ceiling is less than the NPC's actual size. If it is, then we add the crushed event to the event queue. And you can tell there's still some code that could be cleaned up here, like these comments and such. Let's see. We have code that moves the NPC up if it hit the floor or the like. There's also code that checks to see whether we've hit the ceiling, and if we have, it adds that to the event queue. And we modify the next Y position of the NPC if we had to move because of the ceiling or the floor. Then comes the horizontal collision detection. And apparently there are a few variables that I never used. We determine the left wall. We determine the right wall. And of course, if the difference between those is less than the width of the NPC, then we add another crushed event here. We do things that move because of the right wall or the left wall, and if we've hit the wall, then we add that to the event queue. Set the next X position based on this. Let's see here. I'm not sure why we do this. Oh well, doesn't matter. I can find out later. Let's see, if it's solid to the player, then we check to see whether the player is currently standing on the NPC, and I'm basically out of time here.